This is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who's best known for being the creator of the great Sherlock Holmes. But while this is what he's best remembered for, he hoped his legacy would be his influence on spiritualism. Doyle became so entrenched in the spiritualist movement that some people claim as recently as this decade to hear his voice from beyond the grave. Hi there, I'm Alec Belmore, and this is History and Intrigue. In the mid-19th through the turn of the 20th century, many people were turning to spiritualism, a religion that came out of upstate New York, let's go Bills, during the Second Great Awakening. On a basic level, the core principles of spiritualism centered around the idea that communication with ghosts was possible, particularly through the help of a medium. There are many reasons that this concept appealed to so many people during that time, but at least some of its popularity can be attributed to people coming to terms with the unprecedented levels of death and destruction caused by the American Civil War. But it didn't remain a singularly American religion. It spread globally, particularly in English-speaking countries, which is how it found its way across the pond to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. If it seems a little bizarre that the creator of a character so attached to the empirical would believe in ghosts, well, yes and no. Doyle was raised in an Irish Catholic family, attended a Jesuit school, and when he finally left the nest, he left the religion behind as well. While he was no longer Catholic, he was still religious and had a particular connection to the occult. He became a Freemason in 1887, even if he and the Masons would have an on-again, off-again relationship for the next few decades. In the late 1880s, he also conducted a number of seances, participated in paranormal investigations, and was even a founding member of a number of psychical research groups. For much of his life, the paranormal was a hobby for Doyle, but around the peak of the First World War, spiritualism became much more than that for him. He called it a, quote, new revelation sent by God to bring solace to the bereaved. And it's easy to see how this was alluring. Over 20 million people died during World War I. Doyle wrote his first book on spiritualism in 1916 at the peak of the war, and his second in 1919 following the death of his son. But Doyle didn't draw the line at spirits. He was a staunch defender of the famous and debunked Cottingley fairies photos. He even wrote a non-fiction book about fairies called The Coming of Fairies in 1922, in which he explored theories about the existence of possible Tinkerbells. Fairy godparents! To readdress the previous question of how the father of Sherlock Holmes would believe in this stuff, it's because he believed he had empirical evidence to back up his ideas. Here he is speaking of spiritualism in 1927, a few years before his death.
There are many great mediums, many great psychical researchers, investigators of all sorts. All that I can do is to be a gramophone on the subject, to go about, to meet people face to face, to try and make them understand that this thing is not the foolish thing which is so often represented, but that it really is a great philosophy, and, as I think, the basis of all religious improvement in the future of the human race.
For a hot second, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle became friends with Harry Houdini, the famous American magician and known skeptic. Their friendship eventually broke down because of their divergent beliefs. Although there are a couple of different versions of what the straw was that broke the camel's back, one story asserts that Doyle convinced Houdini to participate in a seance shortly following the death of Houdini's mother. Doyle's wife would act as the scribe to write down what Houdini's mom would want to say to her son. However, when the final product was finished, the message was in English, a language his mother did not speak, and bore a cross at the top of the paper. She was Jewish and the wife of a rabbi. Houdini was less than impressed and spent a good chunk of his career debunking practicing mediums. During this time, Doyle essentially stopped writing Sherlock Holmes stories, and his fans were, well, pissed. They would often ask him about the character, of which he wrote in 1922, "Stop writing letters to me about Sherlock Holmes. It is of limited interest. Please ask me about spiritualism, about what really matters." This is essentially the equivalent of a classic rock band playing their new stuff, and everyone in the audience screaming "shut up and play the hits." Spiritualism was his life, and it was his afterlife too. A week following his death on July 7, 1930, a seance was held at the Royal Albert Hall in London where Doyle's voice was heard speaking from beyond the grave. Another seance was held 4 years later, only this time it was recorded. Take a listen.
Take care of my boy. and my God was true. God help our movement forward. Let the old watchman be onward and forward is the wish of Arthur Conan Doyle.
This recording is not an isolated incident, and seances invoking Doyle's name have cropped up even in the 21st century. Look, I'm not here to tell anyone what to believe, so think what you will of this recording. It's often hard to separate authors from their characters. In the case of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, his story might be as interesting as Sherlock Holmes, if not a bit stranger. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe to the channel and drop us a comment letting us know what you'd like to learn a little bit more about. Alright, have a good one.